Well, friends, as you know, we're gathered here this afternoon to commemorate the 40th anniversary, which falls today, of the death of volunteer Brendan O'Callaghan, who was shot dead by British undercover agents at the Hutton Lodge car park way back in those days in the 70s. But I'd like to formally welcome everyone here this afternoon on behalf of the family and the friends and the comrades of Brendan. I'm going to have a formal and a special welcome and a gratitude and a thanks to Amelia, to young Brendan and young Paul, to Pauline, his sister, and Michelle, his sister also, and also to remember our own debt of gratitude to his deceased sister Marion, who died a few years ago, tragically. We have a number of wreaths to lay, and could I first of all ask those who have some floral tributes to bring them forward. As I said, we gather here today to commemorate and to celebrate the life of Brendan O'Callaghan, and also to commemorate his tragic death on his 40th anniversary, which falls today, the 23rd of April 1977. We take this opportunity also to commemorate all of our fallen comrades, our patriot dead, as we gather this time so close to Easter. Could I say that today's commemoration has been organised exclusively by the Brendan's family, his friends and his closest comrades. So the family, as I've said, and his friends and the comrades have agreed. A handful of them will actually say a few words today in their own words and how they, as I've said, best remember and reflect upon Brendan's memories. And on that basis, I'd like to first of all call on Brendan's sister, Pauline, to say her few words.
Thanks very much, everybody, for coming. I appreciate it. Bear with me, it's taken a while, but we're here. Brendan Michael O'Callaghan was born on the 5th of July 1955. Brendan was not named until a few weeks after his birth. His mum and dad could simply not settle on a name they liked for him. However, as our mum stood at her front door in Rockville Street in July 1955, a funeral was making its way along the Falls Road. She asked a neighbour who was being buried. "That's Brendan O'Boyle, an IRA volunteer," the neighbour replied. "Oh, that's so sad, but what a lovely name," she thought. "Brendan it is." As a family, we lived in the Lower Falls, where Brendan went to St Finian's Primary School. Eventually, we all settled in St James's, where our cousins, the Burnses, the Osborns, and the O'Callaghan girls and the Fallons also resided. Life was good, it was safe, and it was carefree. Later, Brendan attended St Peter's Secondary School in Britain's Parade and was to excel in their football team. The era of Geordie Best, Man United, Celtic saw to that. He was afforded trials as a teenager with Southport FC and later Liverpool. There you go, Paul O'Callaghan. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Brendan could also render a tune. I remember one night in particular, my mum and dad getting all dolled up to go to the school concert. They were proud as punch as Brendan was taking part in the show, Dr. Zhivago. We had to listen to Somewhere My Love for many's a day after that show, and that song still causes goosebumps. Our dad worked as a haulage contractor and took great pride with the lorries he owned, but even greater was his pride in telling everyone how Brendan could handle a lorry from he was 14. Unfortunately, safety and happiness were to be short-lived, as Belfast entered into a conflict zone in '69. The British Army were on the streets. Young men of Brendan's age were subject to humiliating searches and brutality. He experienced his young cousins interned. The horrors of conflict had penetrated his world. He was only too aware of how oppression felt, being a young Catholic male, in those times losing friends and neighbours as a result of the conflict, Daniel Rooney and Tony Lewis to mention but a few. But this was no epiphany for Brendan. He was already aware and had experienced sectarianism and bigotry. Being the only Catholic in a predominantly Protestant workplace, He and our dad had to tolerate their fair share of sectarian remarks aimed at their religion, the jobs they were delegated to do, which their Protestant counterparts would simply not take on, the isolation in the staff canteen, which became heightened around the build-up to the 12th of July, Union flags abound, the display of poppies which began around September. I recall several debates he had with our dad when he would question how could he put up with being treated like a second-class citizen. Our dad would reply, "Why can't you just keep your head down and get on with it?" But we all know Brendan, and that was not to be. There would be no cowing down. Brendan was only too aware it was wrong to be treated this way. It felt wrong and it was wrong. Events such as Bloody Sunday in 1972 only added to the already volatile situation, and many young people at that time decided enough was enough. I can also understand how people will say, "But sure, I was exposed to sectarianism, I was harassed, I was treated as a second-class citizen, and yet I did not decide to join an organisation." And yes, I accept that argument, but Brendan's choice to join the IRA was his choice, and we honour that today. I strongly feel, had we lived in another lifetime, things would have been completely different. An IRA volunteer was born, and as we have heard in recent weeks, the war had come to him. At the tender age of 16, Brendan became a devoted father to his young son Brendan, and a loving husband to Amelia. Before being imprisoned in 75, Brendan and Amelia were blessed with another son, Paul, often referred to as a sticking plaster. Against all the odds, they tried to maintain a happy family life, and as young parents were dedicated to each other and their boys. Babysitting for Brendan and Amelia was not without its perils. When my friends babysat for their families, they were left chocolates and treats. I was left small cling film squares and told to swallow them should the Brits raid the house. In 75, Brendan was detained in Crumlin Road Jail. I had occasion to speak with Martin McGuinness some years back in South Derry, and he had reminisced about meeting Brendan in the jail during his spell. They obviously struck a chord with each other, as Martin had shared his fond memories of Brendan. With Martin's recent untimely death, we take comfort that he and Brendan shared times together, no doubt discussing tactics in the current state of affairs. Following his release from Crumlin Road Jail, some 10 months later, Brendan's resolve was undaunted as he once again returned to the IRA as a volunteer. Naturally, as a family, we thought after doing time he would get a proper job and settle down. But that was not to be. The summer of 76 was, I believe, one of the hottest on record and holds many special memories for us as a family. Brendan particularly enjoyed Christmas that year, almost childlike, as he got into the spirit with his young boys and Amelia. However, by April 1977, our world was to be torn apart with Brendan's untimely death. Today, 40 years later, as a family, we are still involved in the legal quest around Brendan's death. Now we have the support of strident lawyers who have assisted us greatly in being able to take ownership of Brendan's case, to seek accountability and redress. All the rights were not afforded to us at the time of his death, simply because we thought we had no rights, and neither did he. Brendan had a foresight beyond his tender years. He was a planner, a thinker. I know many of you here today experienced that from him. As a family, we acknowledge Brendan's dedication to the struggle. He believed in his love for his country, and this was unquestionable. His quest for justice and equality were paramount in his thinking, to have his children treated as equal citizens within their own country. Ironically, his headstone reads, "I died for you to live." Perhaps now we are finally seeing the fruits and the pain of his loss. Judging by the recent election success, his dream is hopefully becoming attainable. We know he made many friends, and his comrades' allegiance towards him has never faltered, and we sincerely thank you for that. Of course, as a family, we were selfish, wishing only that he was here. The son, the brother, the husband, the father, the grandfather. We're only human and go to the what-if steps of our minds throughout our darkest days. These were the most natural feelings. They are there because he was loved. That's what made it all the harder. But who am I to tell this gathering of pain and loss and heartache? Looking around me, I acknowledge all your pain and suffering and loss. No one has a monopoly on that, and we all deal with grief and loss in our own way. That's fine, it's what makes us unique. So when we hear IRA volunteers referred to as terrorists, thugs, non-worthy victims of the conflict, it pierces our hearts. Had Brendan worn the uniform of the state, he would have been labelled a hero. We will not accept a narrative of his life that undermines him or his character. He will not be lambasted by those who seek to secure only their version of the conflict. Brendan was not born an IRA volunteer. He was, like so many, created. Brendan was unique. He had an infectious smile. There was a comfort in being in his company. He packed so much into his short life. His legacy leaves 2 beautiful boys and stunning grandchildren. I want to particularly thank Amelia, who, having been widowed so young, could have easily chosen to bring her boys on another path. Instead, she remained loyal to our family, which proved a great source of comfort to our parents through many dark times. Thank you sincerely for sharing this tribute to Brendan. It means a lot, and we hope and pray that all he dreamed and aspired for are not that far away. May you rest in peace, brave soldier of Ireland. Garmila Mail.
"40 years ago, I'll never forget it. Like others here today, I was in jail. I was on the blanket in the H blocks, and basically incommunicado. We didn't hear any news. Guys in the top cell sometimes would hear the radio if the screws forgot to turn it down. And on that particular day, somebody did hear some news, bits and pieces, and he shouted down to me because it concerned Lenadown. He said that there's been somebody shot dead in Lenadown, and you call him Brendan. And I remember my heart thumping. I said, well, it's bound to be Brendan, because Brendan was in the middle of everything. And then he said he was 21. I thought, thank goodness, that's not Brendan. Brendan's no way Brendan 21. I took Brendan about 24, 25. He was a very mature person. He had a wife, 2 children, and obviously had a home. And anybody, I suspected at that age, would have been much older, because when I met Brendan, both of us were in our late teens and already had a wife and child and another one on the way. So I always took Brendan well into his 20s. And I was shocked when I eventually heard, unfortunately, that I was wrong, that it was Brendan. Brendan came from down the road, and he was sort of an unknown up in Lenadown. I have been about Lenadown for a few years. And he became the OC of that famous company, 1st Battalion. And he was different. He was different in many ways. My experience of OCs would have been guys who'd been on the run, red lights and so on. He would have spent most of their time quarantined in safe houses, whereas Brendan was out and about. He was an unknown, he was out and about. 75 was a bad year as well, because our ranks were depleted, our support base had dwindled, and Brendan came in full of energy, motivation, passionate to get this place back on its feet again. And he set about setting up safe houses, places where we could put dumps, people who we could rely on to borrow their cars and so on, including our own families, as already been mentioned about the lorry. We used the lorry, we used Marian's sister's car, and of course we used my own parents' cars. So I was quite shocked, as I said. 21-year-old, couldn't believe that someone who achieved so much in his life was only 21 years of age. Now, among all that, setting up our new structures, our GHQ, of course, would have been Brendan Amelius, and it was non-stop. It was a good position. The house was in good position because we would see right down Glenvey, and we used the back doors, which is in through Carrigard Square. And Carrigard Square was good too, because the people in that area were absolutely fantastic. They knew what was going on. It was ongoing all the time, and if anything was untoward, they would come and tell us and let us know. If there was something in Amelia and Brendan's house, whether it be even his parents were in the house or Amelia's parents were in the house, which we couldn't go in then, they would open the doors and let us in. And we're always delighted to let us in too, because they were held in great respect. Both Amelia and Brendan were held in great respect. And through all that activity, where we were in and out of Brendan's and Amelia's, and there was packages going in and out, and there was cars in there, that square, and all of them were hijacked cars. I have to have total respect for Amelia, because Amelia was raising children in that atmosphere, and she did it as best she could in that abnormal situation. She raised those children, she looked after that home, and she always opened the door to us and really looked after us well. So total respect as well to Amelia. While we're all going to grow hopefully old and grey and die and people will forget about us, Brendan will remain 21 forever. And he will be remembered long, long, long after we're gone. Okay, thank you.
Well done, John.
I see his blood upon the rose, and in the stars the glory of his eyes. His body gleams amid eternal snows, his tears fall from the skies. I see his face in every flower, the thunder and the singing of the birds are but his voice, and carven by his power, rocks are his written words. All pathways by his feet are worn, his strong heart stirs the ever-beating sea. His crown of thorns is twined with every thorn, his cross is every tree.
Thank you very much. I'd like next to us, Seamus Finnegan, another close friend and comrade.
Gormagad a carja, Falcha Riv Gak Dinyogov, Go Gibnakan, Oglak Brendan O'Callaghan. It's really great to see so many friends and comrades here to pay tribute to one of Belfast's many heroes. 40 years ago today, I was lying in a cell in C-Wing H Block 1, listening to the radio, when the news broke of a fatal shooting at the Hunting Lodge bar on the Stewartstown Road. Obviously, being from the Lanadoon area, I had a special interest in the breaking news. I was also a regular patron of this well-known establishment and friends with the manager, as was the rest of our social circle at that time, including Brendan. As my mind raced and explored every possibility of what could have happened, I never really wanted to consider the worst case scenario. I listened to the news every hour on the hour, waiting for an update and clarity about the shooting incident question. Needless to say, I had a very restless night. The next morning I listened to the first news broadcast possible. The news was now unfolding that an IRA volunteer had been killed by the British Army. He was named locally as Brendan O'Callaghan. It is difficult to put into words how I felt at that moment. Once again, my mind was racing, asking myself questions to which there was no answers. As soon as the cell doors opened, I went to speak to other local prisoners who were in the wing with me at that time. It was the main topic of conversation for days. Prison is the worst place to be in circumstances like that. You feel absolutely useless and frustrated. My thoughts then turned to Amelia and the two boys, Mickey and Teresa O'Callaghan, and Brendan's sisters, Michelle, Marion and Pauline. I knew their world was now in turmoil. For us in prison, it was now a waiting game. During this period until after the funeral, every local prisoner was interrogated for scale about the details of what had happened. We were all heartbroken and shattered at losing a very close friend and comrade. If truth be told, I only knew Brendan for a short while, but having said that, he made a very strong impression on me. He was the OC of the Greater Lanadoon area, a proud position to hold in the IRA's 1st Battalion of the Belfast Brigade. Brendan was mature beyond his years. He was a leader and a father figure to us, even though he was only a few years older. He tempered our youthful exuberance in the ceasefire period of 1975, when our energy and enthusiasm for action tended to overwhelm us at times. We all became good friends and comrades, just like family. Today is very special for those of us who couldn't attend his funeral in 1977. This is our opportunity to say farewell and to remember him with pride. The narrative of the conflict is a contested space for heart and minds. It is worth remembering that Brendan O'Callaghan did not go to war. That war came to him and our community. Brendan O'Callaghan was not a terrorist, nor was he a criminal. He was a freedom fighter. He was fearless and selfless. Unfortunately, he paid the ultimate sacrifice with his life. Like many other young Irish men and women, they have all gone to their graves prematurely. The best tribute I can pay to Brendan is to carry on his work and ensure that his sacrifice is not in vain. So when Bobby Sands said that everyone has their role to play, no matter how big or how small, he wasn't joking when he said those words. If we want to realise the dream and vision of Brendan O'Callaghan, then I ask you all to join us in struggle and help us build this new Ireland. Cully Sav, Brendan, Sona Sarta Gonai.
One of the things that strikes you when you're listening to everybody speaking is about Brendan's maturity. He had a maturity and probably a reassurance about him and a confidence about him. I said the young Brendan walking across the car park the other day, he just reminded me of his gait. He had a maturity and a calmness, and I keep being surprised about his age when we always thought he was older. There was many reasons not to like him. He was smart, he was good looking, he was brave, he was charismatic. He had all those sort of features, and he was dearly loved within families and friends, and he brought all of those characteristics to republicanism. He was a great activist. He was a powerful Republican. He had great energy about him. He had great interest in international struggles. Kept talking to me about what the Palestinians were doing, and he wanted to do it, and I didn't want to do it. So he was always away. He was always away ahead of himself. I met him in 1975. I don't want to go through all the things that everybody's went through. We were together on the day, many of us were together on the day that Jackie and Kevin and Jared and Brendan were arrested. And Brendan was our boss. Brendan was the leader. He was the leader in those days. I met him 6 months later in Crumlin Road Jail. He was the leader there. And when I got back out again, he was the leader again. You had no chance of being a leader when he was about. He was a great lad. In 1876 and getting into 1877, the British government, as Seamus says, had an ulsterisation policy. Part of that, they had ulsterisation and depoliticisation and criminalisation and sectarianising the struggle. And part of their strategy was to inflate, exaggerate Catholics and Protestants and Republicans and Loyalists. To that extent, the British government formed their own counter gangs, named the MRF and other groups. They bombed the hunting lodge, they bombed the Glen Owen, they bombed the Whitefort. Republicans were very alert to all of that, very keen to be in defence of their people. And within the context of that climate, Brendan was murdered by the British Army, shot in the back in the hunting lodge car park. I was there that night. I was in the hunting lodge. I was also with the family that night. I mentioned to the family earlier that I wanted to mention that the fact that it was 40 years ago is like 4 days ago. I could tell you frame by frame the whole evening, and I'm only sitting realising today the degree to which I have an affinity with everybody around Brendan. And even that night when Martin Lavery and I were dealing with how we respond, as we're only kids, we're only 21, how you deal with this. We knew that Brendan was dead. We knew immediately that he was dead. We didn't realise that the family didn't know that for a while later. Martin and I tried to arrange that he would be at the house with Amelia until, guarding the door, that nobody would go in to tell her until I went down to get on Gorman, who was with Tommy on the run down the road. But by the time we got back, the priest was there. And when I went down to Mr. O'Callaghan's house, Harry Burns had stopped me on the way in and asked me how Brendan was, which let me know in a strange way that it wasn't certain that Brendan had actually died. So when I went into the house, that was like bringing that news or that confirmation in, and those things, the loss to the family, the degree of despair, and grief, and bringing home the nature and the loss of Brendan all just comes at once. And those are very striking images and memories for me, probably out of the last 45 years, the most striking and personal to me in all of it. Brendan was political, he was Republican, he was strategical. Somebody said earlier he was a thinker. Brendan never stopped. He was a happy guy. I was actually thinking about putting a tie on it then, saying to myself he'd laugh at me wearing a fucking tie. He was a funny fella. He was witty. He was onwards and upwards. He was positive. He was. I was with Brendan for about 5 weeks. I got out of jail on the 18th of March, and Brendan got killed on the 23rd of March, 23rd of April. And those 5 weeks, you just live in each other's pockets, day and night, day and night. And it's very rarely that you meet, and we do meet them, and this crowd's full of them. And I noticed a couple of people who were very privately in the background of Brendan, who are in the crowd today. And it's great to see them. But he was a dynamic and a leader, and probably characterised the best of the army, best of republicanism, and the best of what's happening today. Brendan would be to the fore. You can never speak of our patriot dead, about what they would think or how they would think about today, but whatever it would be and whatever Brendan would think, he would be to the fore of it, giving himself 24/7 every day, flat out at it, whatever that would be. And he always would remind me of, when you get questions in your life, spoke to my own parents about this, about if anything ever happened to me. When people ask things like, was it worth it, and what do you think they would think now? You always be clear to tell people, up until the minute you last seen me, it was worth it for me. And I'm absolutely sure that everything about Brendan to the second he died was worth it for him. That I'm absolutely sure about, and everybody else reflected on where republicanism is going today, and we can be more and more reassured that it's been worth it for all of us and everybody the length and breadth of Ireland, as we look forward to a brighter future and a united Ireland and a Republican Ireland. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
Goshisa glan mordo gama wajin howdy wala main kaya gakyol wera dramdan jesh me shatama le kofina shangra in sa glor gorolas chin exalocha navin hanik me jalro nasir shesa chantel her guaya oiger sesoya glen bansra onatan shearish tu emai shlin go hansra in sa glor gorolas chin exalocha navin Hishami or a chaim shan moiga higash chaloe go words na galantan go kroga gansir shave gera near ni love bionchi in sagor gorolas chin exochernavim Hishami farbra for boiser saneran svishani niralen gadavawer gan hiale handiravagalonyawe jisnirari shid besi in sagor gorolas chin exlochernavim Movana Go jolly na bai hoga hiando han la shina hol she slochana viendo ni war he go ja for nis kamana itsen Goro glor